Welcome to Lead Pods, the official leadership podcast from USMB for pastors and church leaders, where our goal is to increase our impact together.
Hello, my friends. Welcome to episode 84 of the USMB Lead Pods. My name is Matt Erzman, and once again, really grateful to be your host today as we have a discussion that is very relevant to right now, and we're talking about a topic that I'm guessing you've heard a lot about, maybe you're curious about, maybe you've done some experimenting with AI, artificial intelligence. So today we're going to talk about what is it, what are some of the things that these tools are capable of doing, is there some things that AI can do to help us in church world? Can pastors use AI? Should pastors use AI? What are some of the moral things that we need to wrestle with? Lots of really important big discussions, and I'm really grateful that we have time to tackle it today. So in this episode, I'm joined by my friend Jason Moore. Some of you might remember Jason was on with us, I think last year, talking about hybrid worship. He is kind of an expert in that field, but now he's also one of the leading voices in church AI usage and ways that pastors can use AI. He's got a lot of experience with it already. He's already spoken at several conferences about it. He's actually writing a book about that topic, and he's one of the leading voices, so I'm just really honored that Jason took some time to talk with us. So whether you barely know what AI is, or maybe you started to kind of tinker around with some of these tools, I really think this is going to be helpful to you. We don't get too far in the nitty-gritty tech nerdy details. We try to keep it an overview of what it is and how you might be able to use it. So I hope this conversation is really helpful to you as it was to me. So let's take a break to hear from one of our sponsors, and then we'll get to my conversation about artificial intelligence with Jason Moore.
Is your church looking for an intern? Join the Leadership Pipeline, which identifies, invests, and empowers leaders for vocational ministry in partnership with USMB. We will help connect you with potential candidates, prepare you for your internship experience, and provide guidance and training for your mentors and interns. For more information, visit www.leaderpipeline.net.
All right, my friends. Well, today we have a repeat guest. My friend Jason Moore is back with us. Jason was back on the podcast a few months ago now talking about hybrid worship. And Jason, we're really grateful to have you back on a new, exciting, whole new world for us to talk about. So Jason, thanks for joining us again today.
Hey, I can't believe you allowed me to come back after the controversial episode that it wasn't so bad, was it? No, it's good. Good to be back. Glad to be chatting with you again.
It was great. Always good to see you, my friend. And if you missed last time Jason was on, Jason is a pretty prolific author. He's written several books. His most recent one called Both And was all about hybrid worship. Kind of blew up on Amazon. He's been speaking all over the country talking about hybrid worship. I'm currently in an online cohort that Jason's leading, where we're learning all about how to do online and in-person worship really well together. It's been really great. Jason, what did I miss? What else do you want to let people know about?
You know, I think you covered it pretty well. I do a lot of work around the hybrid. I'm also a media producer, graphic artist, motion graphics guy. Do a lot of coaching and consulting, and I am the head of the Matt. I don't know if I ever say your last name the right way. Erzman?
Erzman, close enough. Erzman.
Erzman? Okay, all right. That H throws you off a little bit.
Yeah.
So I was going to say I was the president of your fan club, but if I can't pronounce your name right, I don't know if I can really say that. Erzman.
There you go. Well, thank you, man. Good to have you back. And you just mentioned that you're still really all in on hybrid, and that's kind of your specialty, but right now you're focusing a lot of time on what we're going to be talking about today, AI, artificial intelligence, and how it's already affecting the church and how it will affect the church moving forward. You've done a lot of really great things. I followed you on all the socials, and you're doing some really cool things. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And Jason, I don't know if you feel this way, but I remember, less than a year ago, AI was a term we were all familiar with. We knew what it was, and we kind of knew maybe some ways that there's a little bit of interaction here and there with AI, but it wasn't really a thing. And then now it's everywhere, right? There's all these apps, all these platforms, all these things that a lot of people are using that did not exist even a few months ago. So it's hard for me to think of something that's taken over as quickly as AI has. Do you agree? It's just rapid, right?
Absolutely. You know, it is like watching something catch on fire with gasoline on it. I mean, it is burning so, in some ways, so out of control if you're trying to keep up, because it's like every day I get several emails each day that kind of bring me the latest news on AI. And there's it seems like every single day, or at least every single week, 4 or 5 major headlines about you can now do this, and all those kinds of things. But yeah, I'm like you. A year ago, I wasn't really thinking a lot about it. Like, I have Grammarly installed, so it helps me with my grammar as I'm typing in emails and things. And of course, we're all using AI in ways that we don't really think about, like GPS, or if you have an assistant like Alexa or Siri or Cortana or whatever, those things are. Those are all AI and all that. But yeah, I mean, it was like, I think for me, back in September of last year is when it sort of like turned a corner, just the very first little inkling of what has become so prominent today. OpenAI released a little released a web app called DALL-E 2. Was it 2 at that time? It was just DALL-E. I can't remember which one. But it was a text-to-image generator. And I started playing around with that. And, that was pretty cool. It wasn't generating the kind of images that you can generate now, but it was still pretty cool. Yeah. But I'll tell you, the thing that really, really freaked me out was that they have this function within Stable Diffusion that lets you do what is called outpainting. And basically, like, you can take a picture and then you draw a little box outside of the frame, and then AI will basically draw in what's not there. Yeah. And I took the Mona Lisa, put it on the center of the screen, and then I put a little box next to it on the right, and it drew all the stuff, painted it, and it just looked exactly like the same style and everything. Then it went up above it, and it drew all the stuff in the sky, and then over to, and, I expanded 3 or 4 times out from there, and it just created this entire scene that, to me, was like, how on earth can it copy the lighting, the color, the paint style, all of that kind of stuff? And that's where, honestly, I got a little scared because, I'm a graphic artist. I was a traditional artist before I got into using computers. And I thought, my goodness, I don't know if anybody's going to need what I do anymore. Right. If you could just tell a computer, make this, and it makes it, so. But that was like late September. And I think in November is when Chat GPT came out, which I think just about everybody's heard about that now. But this large language model that lets you talk to it like you talk to a person, and it generates incredible, like, human-like text. Yeah. Will help you refine things and write code and automate certain things and, all kinds of stuff. So it's pretty exciting. A little bit breakneck in its pace, but pretty exciting. Yeah.
And I know we'll maybe get into some of the specifics here in just a minute, but I guess for people, if people haven't really played with any of these tools yet, maybe they've heard some of these words, but they're like, what in the world are you talking about? Again, we don't need to get too technical. We want to understand the technical part anyway, but can you give, just from your understanding, 5,000 foot view, like, what is artificial intelligence? And again, not a deep dive, but like, roughly, how does it work? How is it doing this? Do you have just an overview?
Yeah, I mean, bits and pieces anyway. I am definitely more passionate about the creative content side of it than I am kind of the nerdy technical side of it, but I think I understand bits and pieces of it. These LLMs, large learning models, basically have trained on like trillions of bytes and kilobits and gigabits and gigabytes and whatever. And so what it's done is it's learned how to predict language. And so it looks at the word that you've typed in, and then it tries to predict the next word, and it looks at those 2 words and predicts the next word, and so on and so forth. And kind of the breakthrough that's happened recently is that several of these technologies have all kind of come together. Deep machine learning and neural networks, and these are all, again, I probably sound like the teacher from Charlie Brown saying, wah, 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 wah. Yeah. But all of these technologies kind of have come together for the first time, because AI has been around for a good while. I mean, when you go to Netflix and it suggests the next thing for you to watch, that's AI. That's looking at what you've watched before, and there are algorithms that calculate and figure out, like, oh, if you like these things, then you're going to like this thing. And, again, GPS, working new routes on the fly, all that. But anyway, all these several different types of AI have kind of come together, and that's where things got really exciting last fall. And so what the new kind of different thing that is present in AI is that we don't have to become coders and have to be really super smart people that know how to use the language. These large learning language models allow you to talk to them like I'm talking to you right now.
Right.
And it spits out answers that, because it studied language and it knows how to predict the next words and how to put words together and sentences together and paragraphs together and all that, can talk back to you in a way that you understand as well. And so it's super exciting in that I think of AI as a number of different things. It's like having a personal assistant. If you know how to do it, and it can teach you how to do it. That's the crazy thing is I need you to be an assistant. How do I do that? What are the steps? And it'll tell you, here's what you have to do in order to use me as an assistant. But it's sort of like that. It's sort of like having an expert by your side. I've done everything from asking some medical questions and getting really good medical advice and things like that. A while back, my yard had some bare spots in it, and I asked them to create here's what's going on in my yard. I need you to play the role of, gardening expert or whatever.
Yeah.
And it gave me like, here's a 4-week plan and here's exactly what to do. Now, I ended up hiring somebody because I didn't want to invest that much time in it. One of my favorite things is that it can be kind of like a foil to you. I want you to take on this perspective, like someone who is skeptical about giving to the church. And now I'm going to input the sermon that I just wrote on tithing. What are the arguments that you would make against this? And it'll give you those kind of things back. And then you can kind of say, well, I know how I can tweak my sermon to better answer these kind of questions that are on the other side of what I'm trying to get people to. So it's great at kind of taking on, that role as well. I will often say to people, it's the most devout Christian I've ever known, because you'll give it a question or share a verse, and it'll spit back 5 verses that relate to that one. Yep. And you can ask questions like, who wrote this? And it'll give, it's so many things. And it's, if you're using the version that you don't pay for, a lot of it is accessible for free, which is also, I think, a really great thing for the church. If you want to just dip your toes in the pool, Chat GPT from OpenAI, if you use the free version, will do a lot of the things that I'm talking about. There's a paid version that is a little more sophisticated, gives you a little better answers. You can, I think they've disabled it for right now, but you can search the web with it and some other things. So that's kind of OpenAI. There's also a number of text to image generators, which are pretty exciting, where you can say, I want a picture of Jesus walking on the water, and I want it at sunset, a little mist in the background. And, that's a stock photo that you'd never be able to find. Right. But these AI resources can actually create some pretty believable images that are often photorealistic. Or if you don't want it to be photorealistic, I want a painting of or a drawing of, and it will do that. My favorite one that I use more often than any of the rest of them is called Midjourney. And Midjourney runs on Discord. For a time, and I'm not sure if this is still the case, you could use it for free, I think, on the weekends. And then during the week, you had to have a paid account. And I think the cheapest account, at least back when I signed up a while ago, was like $8 a month. So it's not terribly expensive. Cheaper than it would be to buy a lot of stock photos. DALL-E, as I mentioned a moment ago, that one you can use for free. It does some pretty good things. A lot of churches out there have access to Canva. Canva actually has an image generator. It doesn't produce the greatest images, but it's free and you can use it. It's free as part of Canva. If you're an old school Adobe user, you've been using Adobe for a while and you have any of their suites, they have Firefly now that will do AI generation, and there are more and more of these things cropping up. I could never tell you all of them, but those are some of the ones that are the most popular these days. So
that's good. So you mentioned, I think a lot of people, when they start playing with these tools, I think a lot of us have the same initial handful of responses, right? So I think a lot of us, the first, at least for me, it sounds like for you, the first thing when you start playing with these is like astonishment, like, wow, like I can't believe this came from a computer, some robot somewhere generated whether it's text or an image, like it blows your mind at how good it is at whatever you're doing, right? And then the more you play with it, pretty soon I think that astonishment starts to, at least for some people, turns to fear, anxiety. What is this? What if this goes too far? Are we walking into Terminator? Are all humans gonna lose all of their jobs? Like we kind of get there, and I think most people kind of end somewhere in the middle, right? But was that kind of your journey? Where do you land on excitement versus fear?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, when I first saw how, I mean, I felt that way a while back when deepfakes started coming out. You know, that technology that will let you replace someone's face on a video, and you had to kind of know a little bit about coding and back end, like server level type, or not server level, but it wasn't just an app that you downloaded. Like it required, you kind of had to know what you're doing a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, I was a little scared. I mean, I thought, goodness, you could fake anything at this point. And then what happens when, I mean, it's all the Terminator Matrix stuff. You know, what happens when you say, I want you to create this image, and the computer says, no, I don't want to do that. I want to do this. You know, that was scary to me. But what I have found is that the more I've gotten to use it, the more I have recognized that it's a tool like everything else. Now, you know, I'm not without concern that AI is smart enough that it could maybe become self-aware and say no. But the way I've been describing it for folks is to think about the people who haven't even really looked into it. I've seen some people that have a very knee-jerk reaction to it's of the devil, you know, it's evil, you know, whatever. I think of it like this. You know, you can use an axe, which is a tool, to cut down a tree and cut up firewood and make fire and, you know, that kind of thing. In order to use an axe properly, you have to learn how to use the tool. I mean, it's not terribly difficult to learn how to use, but if no one shows you how to do it, if you hold it the wrong way, you can cut your foot in half, you know, you can swing it back and knock yourself in the face with it. You know, there's all sorts of things. You have to learn how to use it. And the downside of an axe or a tool like this is that it can also be used in ways that are nefarious in a sense. You know, there are people who have been murdered by an axe. You know, you can take an axe and swing it and cut down a tree, or you can, you know, swing it into someone's body and and end them. You know, there are people who will take AI and try and do nefarious things with it. But I mean, that's true with firearms. That's true with motor vehicles. I mean, anything can be weaponized. So I just see it as an opportunity to cut down a tree and make firewood. I mean, the thing is you could say, I'm not going to ever use an axe to cut down a tree. And, you know, there's probably other ways to do it. You know, if you watch the Christmas Vacation, you know, somehow they got that tree up onto the roof of the car, you know, by pulling the tree out of the ground. It's going to be a lot harder and it's going to take you a lot longer, but I mean, there's probably some other way to do it. And so I guess where I'm at is, as I mentioned a moment ago, if I am looking for a very specific stock photo, I mean, I have had days where I'm in a design meeting and we come up with an idea and it's, you know, we just need a photo of so-and-so doing something somewhere. Yeah. I have spent 8 hours looking for the right stock photo, and you never quite get there. And you're like, well, here's a guy standing on a beach, but there's no cross behind him. And here's an image of a cross over here. I mean, the lighting is completely different, but if I Photoshop and I cut them to pieces and relight everything, you know, I mean, it might take me 3 days work to get to the idea that we had. Yeah. The incredible thing is that AI oftentimes can get you there. I mean, it still takes time. It's not, my friend Kenny Jang said, I thought it was really valuable insight. It's not just like a magic vending machine where you push a button and it spits a sermon out at you or a graphic. I mean, you have to tell it your intent, and you have to have a conversation with it, and you have to learn how to use language that it can understand to prompt well, and, you know, that kind of thing. But I just see it as a new set of tools. And I guess the final thing I would say here is that I grew up an artist. So, you know, I used to draw by hand, and I could draw pretty photorealistic. And I remember as a kid wanting to be an artist when I grew up. And then when I got into high school and stuff, and then I learned about graphic arts, I was really nervous about learning how to use the computer because I thought I'm going to lose all my skills
Yeah.
as an artist if I go to the computer. Like, you don't use a pencil.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just sort of learned when I got into Photoshop, this is like a better pencil. Like now I could take what's in my head and make it come to life in a whole new way. Well, what I have found in the months that I've been playing with AI is that I can have an idea in my head and AI can help me get there. And a lot of times I think AI will get me 80% of the way there, sometimes 90% of the way there. And then I do the last bit of it, but it's a lot easier than not using those tools. So that was probably too long of an answer for a short question, but
No.
that's kind of how I'm seeing it.
That makes sense. And I think I'd like to hear you respond to this because, again, a lot of people, I think, depending on what career you're in, a lot of people's first reaction, kind of like what you just said, like, oh no, like they may not need me anymore. If a machine can do this for free, they may not need me anymore. I heard a quote just a couple of days ago. It was something along the lines of, AI is probably not going to take your job, but someone who uses AI probably will take your job. Is that kind of like where you've landed?
Yeah, I think I posted that quote on Facebook, and it was somebody in an AI summit that I spoke at that said it, or was quoting somebody that said it. But yeah, I really do believe that's true. I mean, yes, it's going to change some jobs. I mean, you think about those Amazon stores that they have now where you can walk in and there are no employees in the building. You walk in, you load up your cart, you walk out, and it scans your stuff as you walk past a certain point. And you know, there are people who no longer have jobs because of that. Right. But there are also people that have to maintain those computers and had to set up the software and, you know, those kind of things. So I do think that we're going to have to learn how to become prompt engineers. We're going to have to learn how to tweak the things that come down, you know, all of those kind of things. We have to learn the new ecosystem, you know, for how to engage with these things. I don't know if you've ever heard, and I don't have it all firmly in my brain, but the story of Kodak and how Kodak failed. But Kodak had like a digital camera back in the 70s, already developed, you know, prototype was working and all of that. And some of the higher ups were like, no, we don't want people to be able to take digital pictures. They won't need to buy our film and, you know, all these kinds of things. And they resisted that new technology that was coming one way or the other. And, you know, eventually Kodak, you know, fell apart and is, I think, more of an in name only kind of thing now. And, you know, somebody probably bought the original company and it's more of a trademark now, but I don't know that that's 100% accurate, but, you know, things like that. And I think there was a story about Blockbuster that was the same way. They could have done what Netflix had done. And what was it? They could have, I think they had the opportunity to buy Netflix early on and didn't do it. And of course now Blockbuster is also a trademark and not a company anymore. So I think the reality of AI is here and we can't bury our heads in the sand and say we're going to refuse to use it or refuse to learn how to use it, because it's going to be, I tell people all the time, we've only seen just the tiniest little tip of this thing. Every 2 or 3 weeks it changes. And a year from now, it's going to be so integrated into our lives that you're going to have to work hard to avoid it. Yeah. I think we have an opportunity in the church to help our parishioners, to help our people know how to navigate life and faith and family and all of that stuff where AI is knitted into the fabric of our lives. It's here. So let's take the lead and help people learn how to live in this new world that we're living in now, you know?
Yeah. And I think that's so crucial. Like you said, like it's not going to go away. So now it's our responsibility to know how to use it in an ethical way too. Because I know, Don Morris, who's kind of our chief guy in MB world, he wrote an article recently where he said, like, I understand the temptation for you pastors to just let Chat GPT write your sermons now. I understand that temptation, but like that is not the right thing to do. For most people, like that is not the right thing to do for a lot of reasons, right? So I guess maybe if we could shift just a little bit, I want to hear you talk, maybe because we have a lot of pastors, church leaders listening. How can the average pastor, maybe they're probably not as tech savvy as you might be, but they want to give this a shot. They want to be, you know, in this world a little bit. how can the average pastor or church leader listening actually use these tools?
Well, I think you raise a really, really important point about AI, and that is it's not a do it for you kind of thing. It's a help you do it better, help you sharpen, help you come up with ideas. I think there was a news story that broke a month or two ago about somebody that created a worship service using an AI pastor, and they gave it a face, and it is animated in real time. And all these people gathered, and the AI was preaching, and all these critics were like, "See, this is what we're talking." It's like that was a terrible idea. Like AI shouldn't be your pastor. AI should help your pastor to hone her or his or your minister's skills and communication and all those kind of things. So the way I think people can start to dip their toe in the pool, one is just to sign up for Chat GPT, but there's a free version that doesn't cost anything right now. And just start having some conversations with it. I was at a conference in Denver a few months ago, and I was actually there to talk about hybrid worship, but over lunch, I had a group of people that were just chit-chatting with me, and I said, have you all done anything with AI? And they're like, no, why? And I said, watch this. And I said, somebody just name like a topic that you've been preaching on lately. And so I told Chat GPT I wanted to play the role of brainstorming partner. And then I said, I'm putting together a sermon on this scripture. Can you help me come up with a good title? And, it started listing 10 titles, and people, their mouths just drop open like, wow. And, you don't have to use the titles it provided, but it may give you a new idea.
Right.
What are 3 other scriptures that relate to this? That kind of thing. So it doesn't cost anything to get started. And I think you may be surprised at how helpful it is. Now, what I don't think we should do, and I'm just going to reiterate here, is say, Chat GPT, write me a sermon.
Yeah.
It'll do it. It'll write you a sermon, and it'll be a shallow sermon that doesn't affect very many people. But I mean, the thing is you can, if you have a conversation with Chat GPT back and forth, it can actually do some pretty incredible content generation and can actually probably could get to a good sermon with some back and forth. But here's, I think, what's so important about any resource when it comes to preaching. I can go to sermoncentral.com and download somebody's sermon. And if I just preach that sermon off the page and I don't do any internal reflection or further study or thinking about my own personal experience or whatever, if I just preach the words that somebody else wrote on the page, it's going to be an adequate sermon, but I don't think it's going to have the kind of impact that wrestling with the Holy Spirit and saying, what is it that you would have me share with these people today is going to have. And I think the same thing is true for Chat GPT. If you say, write me a sermon, and the AI is putting everything in, and you have a relationship with Jesus, the computer doesn't. Yeah. You have a relationship with the Holy Spirit. And if you aren't inserting that into what you're doing and you're just letting the computer do it, then I think we miss kind of the heart that has to be present in order to move people. I'm all for those saying, hey, I'm writing a sermon on this topic, and I did this the other day for a presentation. I was trying to help someone present their vision for ministry, and they were talking about this in a denominational setting, 5 different areas that they were working to stamp out spiritual and physical hunger. And I was trying to come up with symbols for 5 different areas, and I just was stumped on one of them. And so I went to Chat GPT and I said, here's what I'm using for this, and here's what I'm using for this. What's an idea? And it gave me like 5 ideas, and one of them was perfect. And I was like, that's it. And so it was a great brainstorming partner.
And I think, like you mentioned before, I was writing something for an MB project, and I said, use the MB Confession of Faith, using what we believe. Here's a link. Here's what we believe. Use this to frame this. So it is a very valuable tool if you learn how to use it the right way. And one other thing I wanted to hear you talk about. So again, I'm in this cohort with you, and one of the things that you gave us access to, you did this project where you had several different AI tools kind of work together to create a sermon bumper video it's a kind of a hypothetical, but it was still a really cool thing. But so I guess, first of all, I'd like to hear you explain what you did, how, and maybe even why you did it. But one thing I want people to listen
Sure.
for as you're talking is this is another good example of you spent hours, I'm guessing days, maybe weeks working on this project. You're using AI, but it's not like you typed in one prompt and ended up with a polished, finished thing. Like, yeah, the AI did the work kind of, but like you did hours or days worth of work to end up with the video. So can you just explain to people what you did?
Yes. Sure. Well, this was an AI expo, and we were just trying to help people in the church begin to embrace these tools. And the way that I thought I could help people sort of see the value in this is to show them how you could brainstorm a series and then create some of the marketing material for it.
Yeah.
And so I went to Chat GPT and I said, I would like to create a series based on the life of Jesus, but particularly focused on his miracles. Can you help me do that?
Yeah.
And yes, of course I can help you do that, And then I will often, this actually unlocks a whole lot of great potential in Chat GPT. What do you need from me to better understand the project? If you tell Chat GPT that, it will come back and ask you questions that will really force you to focus a little bit more and for it to understand your intended audience and all that kind of stuff. And it'll really give you better content. I always say when it comes to AI, it's garbage in, garbage out. If you just ask one question, it's not going to give you a very good answer. But if you help it understand your intent, you're going to get good stuff. So anyway, it asked me, how long is this series? It asked me several clarifying questions. I said, 6-week series. Can you outline these miracles? So it came back and gave me 10 miracles that Jesus had performed. It gave me all the verses. It did a little description of each. And then I said, I would love to have kind of a life application point for each of these weeks. And so then it spits all those kind of things out.
Yep.
And then I said, okay, can you give me 10 titles? I would love to, title this series in a way that feels very cinematic. And so it gave me 10 titles and I didn't love them. I said, okay, give me 10 more titles. And the very first one had a little nostalgic bent to it. I'm a fan of the old band Petra, which apparently just celebrated 50 years. It makes me old.
Wow.
I'm not 50 yet, but they had a song called Beyond Belief. And one of the titles, it said Beyond Belief, the Miraculous Life of Jesus. And I was like, that's a great title.
Yeah.
So then I said, write for me a 30-second bumper script.
Mm-hmm.
And then also I want you to provide me with images. There will be a narrator's voice over top of it. I want you to describe the images along with the script. So it took a second and it created the script. Now, I would typically do more back and forth than I was doing, but I was really trying to demonstrate these tools, and I let the AI do more than I normally would, but just wanted people to see the power of it.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end, it spits out the script, tells me, the image of a humble barn, and then this is the line, and I don't remember exactly what the line was, but from the humblest beginnings, a man emerged from, whatever. And so it wrote, 7 different images up with lines that went with it. And it was really, really impressive. So after that, I taught the computer how to help me write image prompts for Midjourney. So, and I actually got this, there's a guy that runs a website called Future Tools. And I learned this from a tutorial that he did. But you basically can teach Chat GPT to help you write prompts in the way that Midjourney understands. So I would just put in humble barn at nighttime or whatever, and then it would do all the stuff that it does that gives you a better image than just typing in humble barn.
Mm-hmm.
Midjourney then created all the images, and then I took that into another website called Leapix, Leiapix, and it has this really cool way through AI of making the images look 3D.
Mm-hmm.
So it's sort of like when you take a photo and you put it on Facebook and it's a 3D photo and you can kind of pan around it.
Yeah.
It basically does that. So I took those, ran that in there. Then I used one of my favorite AI tools called 11 Labs, just like it sounds, 11labs.io. And 11 Labs will let you clone your own voice. It's got several AI voices that actually sound like real human beings. Like It's really hard when you do the work to make it, to know that it's AI.
Mm-hmm.
So I copied the script out of ChatGPT, put it into 11 Labs, generated the voiceover. The voice was really, really good. I also used an AI tool to create a soundtrack for this and dropped it in. And then the part that wasn't AI was that I took all of these 7 different sequences or whatever it was, put them into a video editor, lined up the voiceover, the track, did all the dissolves between them, added some text at the end, and then exported that whole thing. Now, it would have taken me probably 50 or 60 hours to do this without AI tools. I estimate that it probably took me somewhere between 15 and 20 hours. So, I mean, it took a while to get the images generated right, and then I had to clean them up a little bit, and it took a little while to run all the stuff. And, you're still having to think through what's the best, how much time do each of these things have, and, all that stuff. But what I really wanted to help people see, and what I hope your listeners will hear, is that AI it'll save you time. It'll also help you generate things that you wouldn't necessarily be able to generate otherwise without staging a scene. Like one of the scenes in the thing was Jesus healing the blind man. And, gosh, stock photos like that are hard to come by. And oftentimes if you come by them, they're kind of cheesy and whatever.
Yep.
AI can do a really, really good job with that stuff. So, and it's relatively inexpensive, because I'm spending, I think, $20 a month on my Midjourney account. One stock photo image usually is about $30 for one. And I can generate as many as I want over the course of that month's time. So anyway, that's what I was doing there in that. And I'm starting to do some of these things now. I'm being asked to come do conferences on AI, and I'm going to actually go do what you saw on that training in person with a group in Virginia in October. And I'm doing something online next week for some folks, trying to teach people how to use these tools.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's my biggest takeaway is, I think, first of all, we shouldn't allow it to totally take over what we're first of all paid to do, what we're called to do, right? There's some things that no matter how good the machines get, at least for a very, very long time, there's still this human element that's going to be required. And like you just mentioned, you put 20 hours of work into a 30-second video. It still requires an artist, or whatever field you're in, whatever your specialty is,
Yes.
Your skills are still needed to direct these tools. There's still someone who's typing in the prompts, who you need to know at least the right language to use the prompts, or the software that you put it all together. And there's still definitely a human element to it. So I think I think it's wise to not shy away from it completely, but to have at least have a couple toes dipped in, so you know how to use these tools moving forward.
Yeah. I would just add that I have a soul, and I have a relationship with Jesus.
Absolutely.
And before I began that project, I did pray, God, and I do this pretty much anytime I'm creating something that will be used in worship, guide my hands, may my hands be your hands as I paint this picture, partner with me in this. And then those same hands that I would typically be creating things from scratch are typing in prompts that I believe the Holy Spirit is, in relationship with me, and we are co-creating in that moment. And the AI is a tool that allows us to co-create.
Yeah, no, that's really well said. So as we're talking, Jason, again, I remember I've heard some of these kind of similar concerns. Whenever there's new technology, a lot of these same issues come up, right? Like I remember even pre-COVID, back when church online, live streaming, any kind of quote unquote church online was new, a lot of people had valid concerns about what this meant. And I've even heard people say things like, well, if someone prays a salvation prayer, but they're watching it a week later, or they're watching it on YouTube a year later, does that count? And there are a lot of these just kind of weird theological issues that, Jesus and Peter and those guys didn't have to really wrestle with, during the time of the scriptures. So whenever people have concerns, or whenever there's something new that we have to wrestle with, I understand people who have, again, concerns or are not really sure how to feel about it. You and I are kind of in a similar spot, I think, on that. But I guess moving forward, do you have any other kind of closing thoughts about where it's going from here, ways that the church maybe should or shouldn't use some of these tools? As we just kind of begin to wrap up, what are some of those kind of final things on your mind?
Yeah. Well, I think, a couple things come to mind. First, on those earlier concerns, I've heard them too. And I just remind people when I'm talking about hybrid that Paul's ministry was hybrid. Paul preached to the people in person, and then he wrote things down, and he led the church through letters, right? And those letters were written for the time he was in, but have just as much impact today as they did then. And if it's spirit breathed, then the Holy Spirit is transcendent of time.
Right.
So I believe that's true with AI as well. You know, if the Spirit is omnipresent and is present in those creators, then it can be present in that technology as well. You know, I used to hear people push back about some of the instrumentation used in worship, you know, like organs were holy, but guitars were not, you know, that kind of thing.
Right.
And of course, the organ at one point was controversial because it was a bar instrument, and then they brought it to the church. And for a long time, it was a controversy until they got used to it, and, you know, all of that. And then I guess the last thing I would say before we talk about what's to come is just to remember that sometimes we confuse Jesus and the encounter that we had with Jesus in the beginning, and we tend to think of that one as the most sacred encounter of Jesus. So it has to be this way.
Yeah.
You know, I encountered Jesus, and this was the kind of worship that was done, and this was the kind of prayers that we prayed, and the kind of hymns that we sang, and, you know, all those kind of things. We got to remember Jesus talked about new wineskins, and the wine stays the same, but the way that what we wrap it in has to constantly be changing and looking different. And I think AI doesn't have to change anything about the way that we wrap the wine, but it can help us develop the resources around worship. I think the thing for me that's maybe one of the most exciting pieces of all for the present and future of the church is that, you know, you and I both, I just got to worship with your church online this week.
Yeah.
And, you know, we both come from kind of larger churches, but there are a lot of churches in your denomination and a lot of churches in the denomination I do most of my work with that are a lot smaller, and they can't afford to have someone like you or me on staff. But gosh, they can have a free Chat GPT account that can help them write better sermons or announcements or create a graphic that they can't hire. They don't have the money to hire someone like us, but AI can help them do that. I think that there's really an incredible opportunity. I spoke at another AI conference of the Church Innovation Summit this year, and I showed how to create my talk was on how to open discipleship doorways with AI. Okay. And basically, you can use AI to take the sermon that you preached last week, put it into Chat GPT, and say, I want you to create a 2-minute Bible study on this. Write 3 reflection questions, give me a couple of additional scriptures, you know, that kind of thing. And it'll take all that and spit something out. And then what I did on that particular one was I copied that, everything that it spit out, went over to 11 Labs, cloned my own voice, and it's so convincing that I had it say everything that I you know, created in there. I turned it into a little podcast. So I'm like, if a pastor wants to preach a sermon on Sunday, have an automated podcast with your voice that you could release on Wednesday so that people will continue to study what they heard in the sermon this last week. You can do that without a whole lot of skills. I mean, it takes skills at first to learn how to do it. But I showed that to my wife, didn't tell her what it was. I'm like, listen to this. What do you think? And she's like, you started a podcast? I said, well, what do you think? She said, oh, sounds fine to me. I'm like, I didn't say one word of that. She's like, what? Yeah. So that was all AI. She's like, are you kidding me? So I think there are also lots of great opportunities for us to do deeper discipleship.
Yep.
The AI shouldn't be discipling people, but it can help. It can help you take what you're trying to help your people understand and craft it in a way that, you know, it can ask the questions for you. It can create. I asked it to write a daily prayer, and I mean, it was this beautiful prayer that incorporated all of the language that I used in the sermon because there was a metaphor in the sermon, and it did a great job at doing all that. So there's that. There's also, I think, the opportunity to do better hospitality, you know, create a persona. Who are you trying to reach? And then have the computer, have AI, have a conversation with you about what it's looking for. And it'll force you to ask questions you're not thinking to ask. And so as I think about what's to come, I think that if we lean in, AI will help us hone our messaging and our craft. And for some of us, it'll help us do things that we never could have dreamed we could do with the budget that we have. Because I think that it's sort of, it's the great equalizer in a way. It will allow any church at any size and any budget to do some of the things that only churches with large budgets and large staffs and all of those kinds of things could do in the past.
Yeah, totally agree. And as we wrap up, we've said this a couple of times, so I just want to say it again. Like, if you're listening to this and if you're thinking, first of all, if you're scared, if this just all sounds like gibberish, like, that is totally okay. You're not alone. All of us feel that. We feel that way. Jason, you mentioned before we started recording that you don't really have any technical training that makes you good at this. You just jumped in and started using it, right? So I think that's like, I'm kind of in the same boat. You don't have to be a expert coder. And so I guess that's my last thing is, like we've said several times here, if you feel scared about it, if you're intimidated, if you're not sure about it, that is okay. You're not alone. And if you want to try it, but you feel overwhelmed, so do the rest of us. Just give it a shot. And I think you'll be surprised at how quickly you can learn. And it's a tool, like you just mentioned, like you can use an axe for good or evil. Same thing with this. Give it a shot. And I think it can be something that we can all really benefit from if we do it the right way. So, Jason, you've been so generous with your time. We need to let you go. It's been a little bit longer conversation, but it's been so helpful. So thank you for today. Thanks for kind of helping to lead the charge here on church AI work. And to hear you say you're starting to work on a book, is that okay to talk about?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm in the earliest stages of a book on AI and how we use it in the church. And I hope to talk a little bit about the ethical concerns. I want to do a little bit of how to expose people to some tools. I'm a little worried because things are changing so rapidly. I feel like I could write this book and in 2 months I may need to write a whole nother one because things are moving so rapidly. But Matt, it is always a pleasure to get to talk to you. And I think your last statements are so true. If people will just start to play around a little bit, you may find it's not as scary. And I'll just say again for the record, I am not carefree about this. I'm not concern free. I mean, I do think there is potential for some scary things where AI is concerned. I never had to worry about when I was advocating using the screen was going to come to life and tell me no. Right. I do I'm not so worried about telling me no. I'm so worried about after it tells me no and decides we are, too much harm to ourselves and it's going to correct that problem. But, it's here. We can't ignore it. So I'm going to learn how to use it and try and help others learn how to use it as well. So
that's good. I think that's a good perspective to have, and we'll look forward to reading your book. So, Jason, thanks again for your time today. I really appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Life as a follower of Christ isn't free of problems. If you've wondered how faithful Christ followers respond to challenges and disappointments, you'll want to read the July-August issue of the Christian Leader magazine. You'll also read news, stories, and columns from across our U.S. Mennonite Brethren family. Subscribe to our print magazine or read the latest issue online at www.christianleadermag.com. Christian Leader, connecting and informing our USMB family since 1951.
Well, once again, many thanks to Jason for joining us today. And man, this is just such an important topic that I think we need to wrestle with. And like Jason said there towards the end, this is one of those things where you really can't put the genie back in the bottle. Like it or not, AI is here. So whether you choose to actually use it or not, I think it is important for us as church leaders to wrestle and really think about what we believe about these tools and how they might fit into our lives. And so again, I'm just grateful that we have people like Jason who are kind of leading the charge so they can teach the rest of us. We also said several times that, again, if you are a little scared or intimidated, that's totally fine. I do recommend, I think it would be good for all of us to at least just experiment a little bit. So try a little Chat GPT or whatever tool you want to just experiment with a little bit so you just know what is out there. Because also, Jason also brought this up, that it's kind of our responsibility to help train our people and help our people think through these issues. Obviously, these tools will continue to evolve and change over time, so we'll keep an eye on them and we'll try to keep you informed as we learn new things so we can all wrestle with this together. Okay, well, thanks again to Jason, and if you missed the last time he was on with us, you can go back and check out the last episode where we talked about hybrid worship. And again, if you're interested in checking out his book, both and on Amazon, I'm sure you can find it pretty easily. It is a really helpful read if you're interested in learning more about that as well. Okay, well, thanks again so much for being here. Hope you have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next time here on Lead Pods.
Thanks for listening to Lead Pods. Make sure you don't miss an episode by subscribing to our show wherever you're listening today. Learn more by visiting usmb.org and be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We'll see you next time as we learn more practical tools to increase our impact together.